Hello, amazing hackers. Hope you're all doing well. Welcome back to the channel. I have the amazing Mr. Beers here with me. Thank you so much for joining me, Mr. Beers. Can you please,
Yeah, you're quite welcome.
could you please, for the viewers who don't know you, tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, my name's James Beers. I am a security researcher, and right now I'm getting my bachelor's in cybersecurity. Started out in mental health care and fast food, and I've just always had a knack for computers, so I decided that 30 years old was the time to put that into motion.
That's awesome. And you've got a job as a cybersecurity engineer now as well, I've heard. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's way cool. It was really hard to break into the field, but I found this company and the guy really liked me, and now I'm hired on and I get to do all of the nice web and API things that I do naturally. And the self-learning is praised in this job, which is amazing because I'm not used to that.
I guess I could just tell everybody Mr. Beers is working for me partially as well. And I'm really grateful I've been able to snag him before anybody else, because as you'll see in this interview, he's quite knowledgeable as himself as well. So we've had some questions from the audience come in, and I'd like to go over them together. First one comes from Lion King. He asks how to learn to be able to code as quick as possible for cybersecurity roles and beginner roles. Would you like to kick it off?
Yeah, definitely pick up Python. Python is a great language. It's easy to learn. You can learn it pretty quickly, and everything inside of Python applies to other languages, deeper languages, and more broad languages like JavaScript objects are the same as a Python dictionary. So you're starting to learn little pieces of other languages while you're taking Python. It's a great first language to get into, and it applies to cybersecurity.
Definitely. Yeah, for sure. And make sure that you always pick a project to create that you're going to use yourself. Because if you're making something that like a tutorial always says, make a calculator, make some basic stuff, that's all fine and dandy. But eventually you're going to have to make a project which you will use yourself. Otherwise, it's not very, like, you're going to lose motivation much quicker. And
Yeah, and a good book for Python projects is Black Hat Python. You'll learn port checkers, IP scanners, how to write minimal exploits and things like that, proxies, self servers, really cool stuff.
there's also this guy I know called Christy Vlad. He also teaches a lot he has a lot of Python courses on Black Hat hacking. So I'll definitely put his stuff in the description as well, and also the book that Mr. Beers was talking about. And the second question that came in was how to select a specialization in pen testing for a career. There's automobile pen testing, cloud security, mobile application pen testing, etc.
Uh, Follow your passion, man. Get into it and try everything. Try everything. Try all of it. Just don't pick one until you've done at least a year of feeling around and experiencing all of them and learning what they entail. Because you might think that you want to do cloud security, but that also involves cloud engineering, and you might not want to do cloud engineering. You might think you want to do mobile security and get into it, and then realize that most of it's written in Java, and most of the vulnerabilities are API vulnerabilities. And so then you go to APIs and you're like, well, maybe I want to test APIs. And it just goes down the rabbit hole. After that year of experimentation, you'll be able to zero in on what you like and you'll be able to make a profession out of it.
Definitely. And also, what I would like to say on this one is that you start with the most basic one, which is APIs, because in the end, everything communicates with an API anyway. And then you can expand. A lot of people think that web is the most basic thing to learn, but it's really not, because web also relies on a man-in-the-middle proxy 90% of the time, and on a lot of exploration, enumeration, The simplest form, in my opinion, is always API hacking first, and then you'll learn other types as you go along. Like, for
Yeah, yeah.
example, CSRF is not a browser-based vulnerability. CSRF is a server-based, API-based vulnerability. Um, that's a simple one. So yeah, like the specialized, real specialized pen testing out there, like Web 3.0, Metaverse, and all of that stuff, you'll roll into it as you go along. As you go along, you'll come onto projects that you'll want to participate in that bring you further. So that's definitely my advice. Start with the basics and roll further into it. I think our advice very closely matches on that one. The next one was from, by the way, this one came from Pranav. Thank you very much, Pranav, for that question. We also have one from Squarebyte, which is asking, when you're doing a pen test, how much do you follow a systematic approach, e.g. OWASP Web Security Testing Guide, versus how much do you jump on patterns and technologies that you're familiar with? And would you take a different approach for bug bounties?
Oh, that's a great question for me. Um, so most of the time when I'm on a engagement, whether it's bug bounty or penetration testing, I do use the OWASP checklist. But the OWASP checklist, even stated by the people who made it, is just a baseline. It's not an end all be all list. It's not a list of complete vulnerabilities. So what I like to do is I like to use that checklist, and as I'm using that checklist, I use the data from that checklist to test for other things that might be deeper, logic vulnerabilities, um, rate limiting vulnerabilities, poisoning, header poisoning, parameter poisoning, any kind of thing that looks like it's extravagant. I dig for those. And I do it because I like to look for the things that don't fit first. Um, Other people don't approach it that way, and it gives me kind of a sporadic result, and I wish that I could like kind of tone it into being more sectional, but I just haven't built out a methodology for testing those in an organized way. I usually find a pointer and then I'm like, "Oh, look at that pattern. Look at that." And so I guess it's 50-50. You know, I use the checklist and I use the systematic version, but I also embrace my inner squirrel. And I go and I chase the little patterns that I see.
I guess that's what you have me for a little bit, to whip you into shape and to keep you on scope. It's my job
Yeah,
to keep that first of all, to keep the coverage levels guaranteed, because that's what a pen test is all about for me, to guarantee a certain level of coverage. And of course, it requires a certain level of exploratory testing, because if I think about a CWE, like improper authentication or improper authorization, there's a million ways to test for that. So it definitely does require some creativity from the tester itself, but it's also my job to guarantee that we have certain levels of coverage. And level one is basically compliance level. That's the Web Security Guide, Top 10, SANS, CWE, NIST, blah, blah, blah. All of these things are compliance level. And then we get one level deeper, which require you to have business logic function knowledge. So you need to know how the business logic is supposed to work, what is not supposed to happen, how things could potentially break down. And that's that level that you were talking about, is that level deeper. And then we have another level deeper, which is governance level. We're talking, hey, Russia is attacking Ukraine. How can we defend those people? What are the, like, we have to have real coverage there. Like, those are the three levels that I always distinguish between. And I try to gauge what my client requires, because if they only need a level one, there's no point in investing in level three and costing them a lot of money.
exactly.
I really appreciate that. Good one, Mr. Squarebyte.
Yeah, that was a good question.
Next one comes from, oh, by the way, for the bug bounty approach, would I take a different approach for bug bounties? Yes, because bug bounties for me is not even hacking anymore. You have pen testing, hacking, and bug bounties. Those are three completely different topics. Why is that? Because Hacking is playing around, is doing capture the flags, is doing labs. That's hacking. Also, you can do, for example, you can go and look at a cross-site scripting attack vector list, and you can insert one of those attack vectors into Google, and you can go to page 5, click a link open, and chances are that you're going to get a pop-up. That's hacking. You're looking for cross-site scripting, but you're looking very broadly. Then there's pen testing. Pen testing is more, I'm going to do this very methodologically and I'm going to guarantee my coverage. And then bug bounties is I'm going to do whatever the heck I want on a hardened target. Okay, so the next one comes from Ayush Singh, and Ayush is asking, what is success in cybersecurity terms? A vague one, but good one.
Success in cybersecurity terms: being more knowledgeable than you were yesterday.
I like that. That's general.
That's the success, man. Because I mean, it doesn't matter what kind of job description you're in. It doesn't matter what kind of position you're in, or if you're just starting out. As long as you're more knowledgeable today than you were yesterday, all of those other things are going to fall in line.
Yeah,
So that's how you measure your success.
definitely. For me, it's success in cybersecurity is whatever the heck you want it to be. I mean, if you're content with learning one new thing every day, no matter how small, then that's success for you. If you are, the thing is, you just have to be realistic about it and don't set goals that have, like, you have to be smart about setting your goals, specific, measurable, accurate. I didn't know what the R was for anymore, but the T was for time bound. You have to make sure that your goals are set in, like, first of all, that they're set according to a few rules, but they're not set in stone. It's a goal. It changes. The more you learn, the more that goal changes. And second of all, your goals, make sure that they're unreachable, because if you reach your goals, what are you gonna do then? Like, that's why I make goals so far ahead that it's almost impossible for me to reach them. But I work for them every time, every day, I still need to have something to work for, a goal in mind. So I set that really strictly. And for me, it's also learning a lot. I used to think that meaning of life was eternal learning, but I've kind of changed my thoughts about that. Now I more have a feeling that the meaning of life is finding enjoyment in life, finding a meaning in life. That might be also a meaning, and it can be that little girl that jumps around here, that's almost like a hurricane sometimes. That can be meaning as well.
Kind of like the meaning to life is the journey of life
Yeah,
instead of the answer. Yeah.
definitely. I think that's important as well. For me, it's I always say, like, I'm gonna fall in a lot of pitfalls along the way, but if I look back at the road that I've traveled, I think it's beautiful to see that all of that used to be untraveled ground, and now it's a beautiful pathway that I can carve for other people, which is why I love teaching so much.
Yeah, I really enjoy teaching too. Ever since I started my Twitch, man, and people started tuning in, and I mean, I've had people now come back to my channel and be like, "Dude, I learned XYZ from your channel like 4 weeks ago and I just got a bug bounty from it today." And I'm like, "Dude, congratulations, people using my methodology to go out and get what they want." And that's priceless to me.
Oh yeah, definitely. Whenever somebody tags you and says, "Hey, I found a bug because of you," you're like, "Oh wow, that's nice. That's really awesome." I'm proud of you guys for finding those things, and also proud of you guys for not finding anything but trying, because you're still lapping everybody who's sitting in the couch doing nothing. Always
Sitting on
remember
their phone, TikToking,
that. Yes,
staring at TikTok instead of going and pounding some labs or figuring out what payloads work for what.
exactly. Like, if you don't work on something, you're never gonna progress on it. That's the one certainty in life. All right, great question. Thanks for getting so philosophical this late at night. It's almost midnight for me, so let's see. Roshan asks, how long did it take to learn cybersecurity, ethical hacking, and bug bounty hunting? So that's three questions. And how long did it take to find your first valid bug since you started learning? That's four questions, basically.
Okay, well, I can answer all four of them in the same sentence. It took me 3 years of constant bathing in hacking and cybersecurity and knowledge and bugs and NIST and OWASP and college, dude. I'm taking remote college, and it teaches me the fundamentals of the current technologies, which is awesome. But at the same time, I still have to spend a lot of self-learning time. For 3 years, man, I've been just eyeball deep in it, and I absorbed so much through that I was able to come out the other side. So it took about 3 years of constant learning, and you're going to want to give up after one and a half, and it's going to be hard, especially if you're concentrating on bug bounties like I was. I got my first bug from Etsy 3 months ago, 2 months ago, and that was after my 3 years of studying and everything like that. I found a reflected cross-site scripting on Etsy that allowed me to do a full account takeover of an admin account. Because it was on an outside subdomain, I only got paid half price, so I got $600 for it, which means it was a $1,200 bug. Um, it was legit, and that is actually the only verified paid bug that I've ever found. All the rest of the stuff was duplicates and informationals, but I still counted those as bugs because I look at it from a pen tester's point of view. It may be informational, but that's still something that the company looked at and said, well, yeah, but it's informational. I'm not going to pay you, but they go fix it, right? And that's the main purpose, is for them to go fix it. So it took 3 years for me. It could take longer for other people, but if you just keep doing it, it pays off, man, one way or the other.
That's funny because for me, it also took 3 years to get where I am right now. And for me, how long did it take for me to learn cybersecurity? I still don't feel confident to say that I know cybersecurity well enough. Like I will always keep learning. There's always something to do and something to learn. But like the ethical hacking part of it, I was pretty quick with that because I wanted to, and I wanted to succeed extremely, extremely badly. And when I have that, I usually succeed at stuff like that. So I went in, I failed a few times, and then I found my first bug, which was a stored cross-site scripting. You would enter it in the web client, it would pop in the desktop client, and that was a duplicate, which kind of I was pretty mad about it because after so many failures, I first had my final success, and then it was a duplicate. So I got pretty mad about that. But it's okay. I got over that pretty quickly. I went over to Integrity. That's where I first found first cross-site scripting, $750, and that took me about a month. No, I'd say like let's say 3 weeks of constant hunting, 8 hours a day, maybe even a month. That kind of timing is what I'm looking at. And I just wanted to be a pen tester at that moment. I still didn't want to do bug bounties that much because I knew that pen testing just makes more money. You do every hour that you work, you're paid. Imagine doing bug bounties, but instead of getting $750 for a vulnerability, getting paid $80 per hour that you're hunting. That would be a lot more than the vulnerabilities you get, and that's a very base level for a pen tester. It gets up way higher if you're specializing. Like we said, in, for example, the API pen tests, it's a very big niche right now because there is no real API pen testing methodology to follow. It's your own skill level, your own company which does that. But there's like an OWASP top 10, of course, but there's not something like the web security testing guide. And so it did take me a little bit to get into bug hunting. As for pen testing, it also took me 3 years, but I wanted to build an audience as well, which really helps me get customers. without having to spend a shit ton on a marketing budget. So that's also something that I wanted to take into account, of course.
Yeah, that's true. I also, it took me a month and a half to get my reflected cross-site scripting to work. So I want people to know that. Like, I had to manually hunt for it, and I had to manually find the reflected parameter, and then I had to manually find the payload that worked. I mean, it took a lot of hours of me sitting in front of my computer staring at a code.
Yep. One of my cross-site scriptings was the same. 16 hours went into that, and I had to play two WAFs against each other. So the bugs don't, sometimes they're simple, literally an IDOR, something that somebody forgot. Like, for example, when checking for IDORs, you should always check imports as well. Like if you can import a file. Same goes for SSRF. If there's a URL on that file, check for SSRF, for example. People are less inclined to look in those specific places. So they are obvious, but they're either hidden and obvious, or they're less obvious and more in plain sight. But if they're in plain sight, believe me, every other hacker saw them as well.
Yeah,
So
the best thing to do right now if you're looking for cross-site scriptings would be to look at the DOM interaction in the JavaScripts, understand how that works, and try and leverage that because there's not a lot of people attacking the DOM right now.
definitely, totally agree with you. Um, that being said, you should do what works for you, of course. If you find something else that works for you, what you have to know is that in the beginning, nothing's gonna work for you. And eventually you're gonna find some things that are gonna work for you and you're gonna stick with them, get better in them. And that's how you break into bug bounties, my opinion.
Oh yeah.
Let's see here. Mr. Nick asks, what is the most impressive thing you've made out of duct tape? Well,
I I once made an entire duct tape suit with a built-in wallet.
Jesus Christ, why do you have so much time?
I was in high school and me and my friend had a girlfriend who loved duct tape, and so we had this whole duct tape project all day, and we just built an entire suit with a built-in wallet. We were learning the new like duct tape folding art stuff. Yeah, it was yeah.
So you really know how to kidnap somebody. Okay, good to know. Remind me to send your paycheck in time. Uh, Mr. Urban asks, what bug should I be looking for? What's more occurring? I need to find one to boost my motivation.
um Honestly, look for broken access control. Look for broken access control through information leakage. Okay, don't look for like an authorization bypass if it's like you're not authorized to view this file. Whatever, forget that. Move on to the next. Right. Um, Dig for files and directories that aren't on the robots.txt and go in those files and directories and fuzz for more files. Eventually you'll find something that's you're able to access that you're not supposed to, and that broken access right there, that'll get you going, man.
Yeah, and also like broken access control in a sense that I always say test programs with a lot of functionality that have users on different user levels or user groups or user rights, whatever it is, whatever they named it, make sure that you have that in your application and play around with that. It's going to mean that you have to retest your application 5, 6, 10 times, however many different rights there are that you can play with. But people don't do that. People don't like retesting the same target over and over and over again. That plays to my advantage. I'm a bit autistic. I love doing that stuff. Like every time I pass through an application, I find something new that I want to look at, a new parameter, a new way to use a parameter. Oh, I forgot to change the request method. Oh, I have to look at this still. And always do that whenever you're testing for IDORs or broken access control. Change the request method because sometimes it is configured on the server because they forgot to turn it off, but they didn't configure it properly in the code. So you still might have a bypass on those things, like a put instead of a post, for example, or a delete call instead of a get call. You can always try many different things there. Now, when it comes to your first bug, finding your first bug, go with the simple shit. Go with CAPTCHA bypasses. Go with password tokens leaked. Go with parameter pollution. Go with the very simple stuff, CSRF tokens. Go with checking if every form has a CSRF token where there should be one. And why do I say that stuff? Because it's like you say yourself, you need to get your foot in the door. And once you do, you'll find what's good for you, what's working for you. But don't go diving into a complex topic like cross-site scripting when you're first starting out. You're not doing yourself a favor there, even though it might seem like it as well.
I made that mistake and shot myself in the foot. Guys, don't okay, so cross-site scripting might seem like it's simple and the CTFs for it are simple and the explanations of it are simple, but when you actually start testing hardened targets for cross-site scripting, it's not simple. You want to look for
Oh,
simplistic things, IDORs, information leakage, access control bypass, um, any kind of like reset password. Reset password vulnerabilities are great for beginning because it's just how the reset password interacts with the program itself. You know, you have very little areas where you can affect what's going on. And the WAF really is not going to block any of that. You start with cross-site scripting payloads, man. The WAF's going to get you. You're going to have to bypass the WAF, and then there might be a firewall behind that. You know, it gets really convoluted.
yeah, that's the one thing I don't like about current day challenges, like Hack the Box, for example. There's no WAF on there. There's like hardly ever a firewall on there. And that's never happening in real life scenarios. Of course, there's going to be a WAF installed. You just have to know what WAF it is, what rule set is being used. People don't even know what a rule set is these days. So it really pays off to be able to dive into some of the defensive mechanisms as well. That is super important. And when you're testing, make sure that you make like a flow chart, a diagram, an X-mind diagram, whatever helps you know what functionality you're testing. This might be a very unpopular opinion, but forget about broad scope when starting out. Broad scope only exists to find the right domain to hack on. But what are you going to do once you find it? You're still going to be wondering what to test for specifically. That's why I say, and you might think, oh, main application has been tested so much, there's very little scope, very little attack surface. Believe me, there's a lot of attack surface. You just have to find it, first of all, and read the damn manual. Guys, Jesus, how can you know how to hack something, aka how to use something in a way it is not intended to be used, if you don't even know how it is intended to be used in the first place? So read that manual, and whenever that manual tells you not to do something, do it. If it tells you you cannot deactivate super admin users, try it. That was the easiest 125 euros I ever made.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. I actually was on stream today, and we were doing. I forgot the name of the target now. We were doing it off an integrity. I think it was Inno Games or something like that, and they were using a CMS, content management system that I didn't know about. It was like Form 3 or something like that. And right there on stream, I was like, I don't know anything about this technology. I need to go see how this works. And I went and I looked at what technology it was written up in, what kind of language it had, what kind of databases it interacted with, just to get a feel of how their content management system is posting this content. You know, it's research will never hurt you.
Totally agree with you on that. Also, the next one I think is aimed at you. I don't think this is aimed at me. Frank is asking, why are you so awesome?
Oh, I'm so awesome because I've went through the first half of my life uh dragging myself through fire and brimstone. So, after emerging from really dystopian times in my own life, I decided that I should be nice to other humans because that's what nature does. Is it's nice to other living things. So, that's why I'm so awesome. And therapy. Therapy helped a lot.
Totally agree. Therapy does still help for me. And Like life is beautiful, people are beautiful, and I love everybody, and I'm not afraid to say it. Like a lot of people will shun another guy telling them that they love them, but it doesn't have to be in a relationship kind of way of loving. Like you can have brotherly love as well for somebody. Like that's something that's important to realize. Anyway, a little bit of a rant there. Um, Mr. Oken K asks, what do you think about cyber war and do you believe ROS is a legitimate business model?
What do I think about cyber war? Well, I think it's an extremist statement. Cyber war is kind of like saying uh, it's kind of like saying fuzzy violence. It's not okay. So the cyber war is digital, but it impacts people's physical lives. However, the cyber war thing that's going on right now, like right now, that we're going through right now, has never been seen across the world. There has never been such a concentration of people affecting the physical lives of other people through hacking, unless you count like the water treatment facilities and the meat packing stuff. But those are like one offs, right? The cyber war itself, how it's turning out and how it's unfolding, I think is going to be something to watch. I think it's going to be very eye opening for ethical hackers. It's going to be eye opening for governments, and it's going to be more openings for the business that we do and more respect for how our minds work, because now that's actually being brought to light that this is a thing that can happen, you know?
Yeah, definitely. And for those of you who don't know, what the cyber war looks like these days is that cyber criminals are hired by governments to attack crucial infrastructure of other countries. And that is the this current cyber war stage that's going on, is people are not fighting with soldiers anymore, but they're striking critical infrastructure by hacking. And I think, to be honest, I think it's a bit overhyped as well, because like the vulnerabilities that are often exploited are really simple ones. The Stuxnet fire, I'm sorry, it's not called Stuxnet, I believe, the one that struck down the Iranian nuclear power plant was basically introduced because they scattered a bunch of USB drives around and somebody inserted one of those drives into the computer. Well, duh, of course, like that's not gonna be secure. Like, Jesus. And the second one is ransomware as a service. What do we think about that? For me, ransomware as a service has always been a thing, but in a different kind of way. Like if you wanted to blackmail somebody, you would hire somebody or to completely shut down their systems, to remove their internet access by DDoSing them. Um, there's always been ways to screw people over, but I know it's growing a little bit in the years that are now coming. I just I just think that we have to be very careful with companies like Zerodium that are gathering all of these zero-day exploits and then selling them on to the companies. Because if the company doesn't pay, they don't get their zero-day exploits, which is like, it's better than exploits being sold on the black market. I understand that fully. But who's to say that Rhodium is to be trusted fully? Like, that is something, of course, you might trust Rhodium as a company, but do you trust every single employee that works there equally? To be
And
honest,
are you reading that ransomware? Are you actually going through the code and verifying that they're not selling you something that's going to be dangerous?
yep, exactly. Like some of these exploits can be very, very complex, and like Mr. Beer says, they can be quite dangerous. Great question, my friend. All right, the next one comes from Sani Elam. He says or asks, what are the usual approaches while you do bug bounties? Think like I am a beginner and today is my first day to hunt, but I know the basic concepts and tools.
Okay, well, the first thing I'm going to do when I approach a bug bounty target, let's say narrow scope. because wide scope, I could do a whole thing on. Let's do narrow scope. Okay, let's say you just have a main application. All right. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get the URL of that main application. I'm going to put it in Burp Suite as a proxy, and then I'm going to let it sit there. I'm going to pull up a CLI for my Kali Linux or my Parrot box, and I'm going to go through that single URL. I'm going to send Hat Crawler after it. Hat Crawler is a tool that pulls out URLs and JavaScript files. I'm going to send it through GAU. GAU is a tool that goes through and grabs anything related to that URL, anything related to that domain from public crawlers like Common Crawl, Wayback URLs, things like that, right? And I'm going to have, after that, enough data on this target, past and present, to assess where the vulnerabilities might be. Okay, I'm going to go over the URLs and I'm going to check each URL to see if it comes back 200. Okay, any URL that comes back 200, I'm going to check it for validity. And as long as it's valid, I'm going to take the parameters from that URL and put them in a list. And I'm going to put all of my parameters that I find in a list. This list is going to become my parameter fuzzer. Okay, so now I'm going to start with the requests through Burp Suite. And as Burp Suite is sending requests, I can put these parameters in the different places and play with these requests and read all of the headers that you get from your responses, because you can enumerate a target more from the CORS policy than you can from the robots.txt. If you look at their CORS policy, they'll tell you what subdomains and what wildcard domains can effectively make requests to this website. And if you're only dealing with a main application, a CSRF would be really nice. You want to be able to affect that application with a malicious server, right? So that's where the enumeration becomes more of an attack vector. And you just keep enumerating through Burp with your parameters and your requests until you see something that looks very strange, like an error message that has directories in it for the server, or, a redirect that redirects to an external website. Those are the type of things that I would look for first, and then start digging from there and get into the application, learn the logic of the application, make a user, use the user through Burp, all that. And after you have the logic mapped out, you'll be able to look at the API calls and everything else that's happening in the back end, and you'll be able to piece together how the JavaScript files and the URLs you found apply to the target that you have, and then you'll have a full picture. And you can take that full picture and start testing it systematically with any checklist that you want. After you have the data, then you can test the data, but you got to get the data first.
Totally agree with you, and I have little to add on that, to be honest, because like you say, it's a very vague concept. I know the basics. What do you understand under the basics? So we can show you, hey, look for CSTI, look for SSRF, look for CSRF, look for broken access control, IDORs, CAPTCHA bypasses, like there's so much to check. Make sure that you understand that you're not going to finish learning. You're going to learn on the job. That's what bug bounties is. And like Beer said, first of all, get to know the functionality. That's point number one. If you don't know the functionality and you start hacking, you're already doing the wrong thing. You can start with inserting a basic attack vector into every input field that you see. There's nothing wrong with that. But to be honest, for the first few days, I don't even touch my Burp Suite. I have it running in the background, but I don't touch it. So yeah, great question there. Let's see. The next one comes from Mr. RP Live with Mr. Gary, and he asks, how accessible is cybersecurity to those of us who are legally blind/blind? Any recommendations for a training path/career path?
Wow. Actually, you know what? Very accessible. Get a screen reader. Get a screen reader. Open up it, and once you get a screen reader, you can right click. It'll read the messages to you, and then you open up the page source. It'll read the page source to you. I mean, it's going to take a learning curve because you're going to have to learn how to read code by hearing it. But if you can get that down, man, you're golden.
Yeah, and even a simple IDOR, insecure direct object reference, you just have to change a number. And that's something that everybody can do. I can teach that to my grandmother. I can teach my grandmother how to hack, so I can teach you how to hack. It's no problem. Then the next question, and I think this is also going to be the last one for today because we have quite a few left that we can still answer, but we will leave it at that and we'll record a second part because I feel like we can keep on talking forever, you and I.
Oh,
Um,
I like it. I dig it.
yeah, me too. I like our flow. Um, I like you as well, by the way. Otherwise, I wouldn't hire you, of course. That's logical. Let's see. By the way, maybe a little bit about the process that Mr. Beers went through as well. I first had them do a basic test of hacking a website that I've designed with vulnerabilities in them, sending me a report. Then I had him do some programming challenges, see how well he would do in that. Challenged him on his Linux skills, made him do a lot with simple curl. And basically then he got to do a pen test, a real pen test for a part. And we got to see how he worked and we really liked it. So that's why, of course, he's working for us now. But it was a whole process for him, of course. So
It was
congratulations.
vigorous, man. It was crazy. It really was. But I came out the other side. So anybody who thinks it's going to be easy to get a hold of Uncle Rat and get a job, you are way, way, way confused.
Yeah, and you know why? You've seen the kind of tests that we do. They're very out of the ordinary. Like we try to be the testing company that takes on the tests that nobody else wants to take on. And I think we're succeeding in that. We shall see. Mr. Psymore asks, what was the exact first project you started out with? For example, I started with tearing apart a local SQL database with injection strings I found online randomly.
Oh, my very first project was when I was 10 years old. I had just gotten Diablo 1 and I could not stand the fact that I could not be a level 99. And so I learned about what hexadecimal was and how the save files are written. And I ended up going into my regex editor, the registry editor for Windows, and I altered the save files right there in the registry editor through the hexadecimal. It took probably a month and a half for me to figure out which ones went where and how they worked by dropping the save file, loading the save file, dropping the save file. And that project, after that month, dude, I knew exactly how to edit a save file for Diablo 1 to give you all the gold, whatever you wanted, change items, whatever. It was way cool, super cool. But yeah, 10 years old, that was my first project.
I started out as something very similar, also using Cheat Engine, but to do Game Boy Advanced games. Like we had an emulator and we would hack them and see how far we would come. I especially hated those pointers that would always confuse me. Like you would in Cheat Engine, for example, if your health was 76 out of 100, you would enter the value 76. Then you would get a bit of damage until it's 70. Okay, then you search for the value 70 coming out of those previous values until you found the memory address that contains your health. And then you can up it, you can freeze it, you can change it, do whatever you want with it. But you have pointers in there as well. So that's addresses pointing to other addresses, etc. It gets confusing pretty quickly. I'm by far an expert in that kind of stuff. So that's why the next projects that I did were like packets resending. I would pick up gold in a specific game that I played, resend the packet over and over and over again until I had max gold, and then sell it to gold sellers. Um, it was fun while it lasted. They patched that bug pretty quickly, but that's one of the things that I did. And then I started creating my own games, create another game engine. I started out there, but I went over to creating games in my own written Java engine for MMOs. Basically, I was creating a little MMO. And then I lost all of my source code, which is when I learned about source code repositories and shit like that. Yeah, I think we have a bit
Nice.
similar history there.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'd like to thank you very much for coming on, my friend. It was a pleasure having you for this part one, and I think we should soon get together for part two.
Oh, most definitely. Yeah. You have a good night, man.
All right, thank you very much. You too, my friend. Bye, everybody who's watching. See you later.
Bye.